Hi, I'm Paul Warren,
And I'm Ryan Klein.
and this is another episode of SEO is Dead and Other Lies. Ryan, it has been like 6 or 7 months since we've last podcasted. We are terrible podcast hosts.
Yeah, we're especially bad when said, "Hey, I think that we're really getting back to the swing of things. I think that we really have a cadence that we're going to follow for once." And sure enough, here we are.
Well, you know what? We have busy lives outside of this podcast, unfortunately, and I don't think either one of us has had the additional time to spend podcasting how we should. I'm not making any promises that we're going to get back to normally podcasting after last year. But hopefully we get more than we did last year, just in general. So that'd be great for our listeners.
It's definitely wishful thinking for now. And I appreciate it. It's a new Paul. It's not, hey, we're back in the swing of things. It's, hey, yeah, stuff is a little hectic and we'll do what we can.
But yeah, I mean, we're both practicing business people, practicing SEOs for to a certain degree. Maybe a little more than me than you at this point, because I think you're real busy running an agency, which is a great segue to the topic that we're going to be covering today, which is if you are doing SEO, you're interested in starting your own agency. We're going to talk today about how you go about doing that. And there's no one I know that is a better resource in that than Ryan Klein on this podcast, who started something from scratch and grew it to a pretty good sized agency right now. So we're going to cover pretty much how Ryan got started. But let's say you're an in-house guy. You're like, I want to take the jump. I want to have my own business. I have a registered business. It's legal. So we're not going to cover anything that's like, if you were to how to register a business with like your state. Hopefully you can figure that out on your own. You've already done it. But like, let's say you got all that. How do you get your first client? How do you start growing the business?
And I'm sure every single state does differently as far as registration. I only know the Sunbiz, and we can just drop a line for anyone in Florida for that one. Sunbiz.org. Yeah, I think this is an interesting conversation. I think this is something that we'd love talking about right now, especially with the great resignation that we've been hearing about so much, and it's been shoved down my throat via LinkedIn for the past 6+ months. And so, it's interesting because we're in a position, especially with remote work and just all these different configurations going on, that some people have more options to work in-house, some people have more options to go out and consult and do this kind of thing. So I guess, I can tell you to preface everything that in my account, like starting up the agency, this is going to be very anecdotal because it's just going to be based off my experience. But of course, there's some other more structured general best practices, I suppose, too, that were observed much later on.
And yeah. Like you said, so that might be one of the things you point out that you might want to do differently, right?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about like how you started your agency?
There are people that just learn SEO and then decide to be a consultant or create an agency right away, which I wouldn't advise because that's straight up irresponsible. So I'm just gonna, that's my flow chart right there. Have you ever worked in-house and actually done it somewhere? No, don't do this. So you have to start with a yes, and that's the start.
Have experience right before you take on clients. This is like your first step. Okay.
So I didn't start considering doing SEO for other businesses apart from an agency or in-house until I was doing SEO for about 3 or 4 years. So that's a start. I think that I wanted to feel, confident and then be able to responsibly work with people before I was entrusted to take over a campaign that could potentially not entirely make or break their business, but not waste a ton of their money.
Yeah.
So
you work in a particular niche, which is legal, which it definitely can make or break a firm. Like there's a lot of firms that because paid search is so expensive,
right?
And like that particular niche, organic is very, very important, especially if you're like a firm that has to do volume, right? Like if you're like criminal, like DUIs, for example, you got to do volume of DUI in order to like make a living off of that. Just because like the returns aren't that great, in like a DUI case. So there are definitely tons of law firms that like live and die by like organic rankings for sure. Like, the same one that we worked for, I remember we had we had some down periods there, and like there was a lot less legal assistance and working over that time frame than there were before that, because they just did not have the revenue coming in to pay people.
Yeah, it's interesting because you'll have some people that are, I guess I could say, a little bit more dramatic than others, and they say, if things don't turn around in a couple months, I'm closing the doors. And you're like, what doors? Are you talking about, like the front doors? And then it's just kind of a nudge that, there's a sense of urgency. But then when you start seeing people let go, then you might say, hey, maybe they're really like
it does start a little bit of a fire under your seat. You're like, I gotta start doing this. It's real.
So I suppose, not to get too far off topic, going back to the original question, how it started. It started really just with kind of a friend, and that's actually how a lot of these things start. And you probably know that too from having done, you can say, as consulting or a little freelance too. You have generally someone that's a friend or a friend of a friend or a family that's like, hey, they do web. It's like we hear all the time. My grandson builds websites. My my best friend in college, he does social. Like it is kind of the same story a lot of times.
I think once people out there, in the universe find out that how to do SEO, like there's a lot of people that come to you. Whether or not they would be good clients is a different conversation, but there's a lot of people that will come to you and ask for your services without you advertising it, right? Like you will get approached to do SEO.
It's like passive networking. I don't know how else you put it, but yeah, there just becomes this common knowledge that, like, Ryan, Paul, they know SEO. Ask them that they can get you on Google.
90% of the time, you aren't going to want any of those people as like a client. That's not going to have money.
Perfectly accurate number.
But you might find some gems. Yeah, there might be some gems to mine from it.
So our first clients were very straightforward. My dad's best friend, home remodeling, Chicago. I have no business doing it. It actually worked out pretty well for a little bit. It was a little bit easier 10 years ago when Angie's List and Home Advisor and expertise in Thumbtack and everything wasn't dominating directories, and you could rank website like okay, especially with the geo strategy. So yeah, home remodeling, no business doing that. Pest control, friend's father, no business doing that. So there's like a few things, but you get your feet wet. I would say that it's almost like a blessing in disguise to really have someone that's a little bit close to you. You're probably not going to make like a lot of money. You do it on weekends. You do it late at night. You kind of learn what it's like to communicate with the business owner. It's almost like it's like your newbie zone. You get to kind of feel comfortable before you deal with people you don't know.
And so how are you communicating with like business owners at the beginning? Just straight up emails, or like what was the cadence like?
Everything. Some of them are gonna since you're the account manager, you're the SEO, you're a content writer, you're everything, like, and you pretty much don't have good control over the relationship. Essentially, they're gonna probably text you, they're gonna call you, email you. They're gonna do it when it's convenient for them, not for you. You're gonna have to be available. If you don't get back within a reasonable amount of time, they get stressed out. So I guess what piece of advice, which, like, as much as it sounds like it makes sense, you probably wouldn't be able to accomplish that, is managing the relationship. You're going to have to be very, very accommodating, get used to it, at least with those first people.
You've done that. It sounds like you don't have a lot of project management software, right? You're just putting stuff in a spreadsheet
or a notepad, a physical notepad.
Yeah. So it's very raw. It's very like, on the plus side, they get a lot more of your time dedicated to like their particular project, because one, you have less clients, right? So that's good. But were you charging like billable hours, or were you charging just like a flat fee? Like how was that working?
Yeah, we always did a retainer since day one. There's no way that there was anything logical or scientific to how we quoted. There's probably like just a spitball. And also, I'm saying we, because I did go into this venture with a partner. It was a friend of mine, played in band together. Mr. Chase Williams. I've known him for years. So that is unique to have a partnership from the get go.
And you both are working full-time jobs though, in addition to like the clients you're taking.
Yeah, he was in New York. He was working at Adobe doing pay-per-click, and I was in Orlando doing in-house, doing mostly SEO and content marketing. So I guess like Ryan's words of wisdom, like number one, if you do want to venture out and do like 50-50 partnership, the skill set should be, complementary. I wouldn't necessarily advise for two people to do exactly the same thing. A good start, and it still is, of course, but it was especially a good start because of his background in social and paid and my background in SEO and content, and then overlapping with some knowledge of background in web design. It kind of fit together. It kind of balanced it out pretty quickly.
So when you got your first, obviously it was a friend of the family, how you got your first client, right? Did you have him sign a contract?
I doubt it. If I had to think about what would be the first thing that was contractually binding anyone, I don't really know what it was. It wouldn't have been the family friends. They probably would have laughed at it anyway. Like, oh, look, it's cute, you're trying to do like a contract or something. But the first actual client that we weren't familiar with and like didn't have any sort of history with, we had to have used some sort of template, and I guarantee it also wasn't drafted and approved by a lawyer, which it is now, and it has been for a long time. But I guarantee that the first few was very boilerplate and so not enforceable.
You just took someone else's contract and put your name in it, basically, and like
I guarantee it. I guarantee if you were to be a lawyer, you'd be like, you can't enforce this, or there's nothing here that it just was like you can't mess around. You can't mess around with that kind of stuff because when it was solid and we were able to enforce it, it's definitely helped us navigate some things with toxic clients. So it is important.
Yeah. So if you were new, you would suggest having a contract for sure off the bat.
No matter how big you are, or if you're consulting or freelance, contracts. It's just business standard. People are like, well, I don't want to sign anything. It's just like, hey, listen, it protects you just as much as it protects me. Yeah. Like it does. That's the point.
So even if you don't have to legally enforce it later on, it's good just to have something that like puts everyone on the same page and like puts pen to paper, and like I think it solidifies like the relationship a little bit better, right? It's perceived, at least, that it's more solidified.
Yeah, and it makes you also, the perception you use, like more professional. I mean, if there's no contract, then just even one out of a million different things that could happen. You could have a client that calls you up and says, I'm done as of today. And then that's that.
What are the specifics of it? What were you like, this is what we're going to cover, this is what we're going to do? Like, what were you promising?
In a contract, it's typically kind of an overview of the company and the scope of work, and a breakdown of costs and different options. And we don't really do packages, but plenty of people can do packages just fine. Terms and conditions. It's pretty standard.
But was it like, did you have like a service agreement basically that was a part, like that's what was outlined in like the contract? Like, we're going to do it for 12 months and this is the price, and like, were there specifics to like KPIs in it?
Oh, like we're going to hit goals and that kind of thing. Like we're going to promise those kind of things. So that's kind of, this is, I think, in itself a pretty interesting topic, because you don't want to set yourself up for failure in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of, I don't know, I want to necessarily say sales tactics, but there's a lot of ways to kind of circumvent making promises or being held accountable for metrics that might not be always within your control, as making that the only measure of success in a campaign. So that's almost a whole conversation itself. And you probably have all those sorts of conversations. You can have that conversation as in any
in-house, anywhere,
in-house for sure.
You're gonna have to set expectations for like what you're gonna do for like generally it's like the year, or like a specific project. But so how do you set realistic expectations with a client?
So the goal is, and this might sound hopefully it doesn't sound contradictory, but it's setting kind of a range or like a window. You have to kind of give yourself kind of some padding or a buffer for like every metric that you give. So it can't be like you're going to be like definitively rank 3 within 6 months. It's like we're hoping that we're going to get X to here within a window 3 to 6 months, or like at this on the first page. We're not vague. We're trying to be like as implicit with what we're doing as possible. But it's also important to move the expectations to other things that also make sense. So keywords aren't the end all be all. Like we shouldn't be held accountable necessarily for the only measure of success being these keywords in the top 3. We're going to be doing local. We're going to also be doing long tailed. Like the goal is more so you're going to see an uptick in business that we can prove as opposed to just like some vanity keywords. Like it's also good to shift where people place the value.
And you could ultimately, like, maybe you ranked number 1 for a keyword. Maybe the client was like, I want to be number 1 for this. But then you're like, well, there isn't any volume around that, but they still really care about it. And it's like, well, you're already 3rd for it. So if you're number 1, you're not really going to get very much more anyways.
So there's always an ego play. Fortunately and unfortunately, at however you look at it, it happens in legal a lot because, and I'm sure it happens in other industries, but like, I hate that guy. They're number 1. They've been number 1 for the past year. That they suck. They don't even do a good job. And it's like, so you deserve number 1, but Google doesn't think you deserve number 1. But if we get you number 1, you're going to be happy, and that's going to be a win for you. So you just want to avoid those traps, especially what you're saying too, because if there's no traffic, they'll get there and then they'll turn around and say, well, wait, I'm not really getting any business, so this isn't working. And they're like, see, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have focused on it so much.
I've always thought it, and I do this in-house, right? It's like you want to know what the keywords are that are important that convert, and you obviously as an SEO, you want to rank for it because that's like the direct correlation, right? Is like, that's how it all works. If you rank higher for like certain things, you're going to get more traffic from it, and it's going to convert more. But I always just try and like take that part of it out of like what the KPIs are. Like I'll worry about whatever it is, like what they should worry about. And what's cool is like the traffic from it, right? Like, is our traffic going up? Is like the bounce rate going down? Are there like GMB actions like increasing, like views increasing, like all that kind of stuff? That isn't necessarily attached to like one keyword because there's like so many, there's like almost an unlimited amount of like keywords that like will make it like a map hack fire, right? For certain, you can't track them all because there's so many. Everything's important for a different reason. Like some things have no search volume but high conversions, and then some things have like a ton of like search volume but like way more competition. So it's you don't want to focus too much on that. And anytime I've ever worked, you always see like emails from like agencies that are like sketchy, and it's like, oh, we guarantee like top 3 rankings for blah, blah, blah keywords within like the first 3 months or something like that. And it's always like, oh, well, we ran paid search campaigns, right? And so that's how we got it.
Oh,
so
really? Is that how they kind of show the value? They end up doing
that?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, because
that's weak.
So I've always believed just like any SEO agency that promises results usually does not have your best interest in mind.
You can definitely beat other people when you're doing pitches and not have to promise anything. And it has to do with also just business mindset a lot of people you're talking to have worked with SEOs in the past. At this point, it's very few companies. And again, it's a good thing and a bad thing because you have people that are super jaded, but then you have also people that know what to look for, and it's an opportunity to give them a fresh perspective. But yeah, I don't talk to anyone anymore that's like, what are you going to promise me? If I don't hit this in like 3 months, do I get my money back? I want to guarantee. You have to just present it in not the conventional way. And client can't dictate what they're looking for because they don't typically know what's best for them is the biggest thing.
They don't really know how SEO works.
If they've done this before and they have some knowledge, they're going to know that some of their main vanity keywords are going to get business. And like, there's no disputing it. Like if they rank number 1 organically on the maps for like a strong keyword that gets hundreds of searches a month, it's like, yeah, there's no disputing that that's a valuable keyword. The thing is it can't be all about that. So, I guess this is Ryan's tip number 2. The thing with the pitch and how we kind of present it is that there's never going to be one thing that's going to work. Like a long-term goal or a short-term goal might be to go after that keyword, but it also might be a variation. It might be, without a geo. It might be the hundreds of variations like you're talking about how people search. We're going to maybe propose local service ads or a exact match Google ad campaign or work on maps. Like you have to hit it from every angle. And the goal is towards the bottom of the funnel, not the top of the funnel. We're looking at leads like officially. APIs are important because that's going to be, correlative with success. But at the end of the day, however the leads come in, and if they're quality leads, maybe they don't rank top 3, even if you said that you would.
Would you have done anything differently with setting like expectations on KPIs if you had it to do over again?
I'm trying to think if anyone decided to move on because of a very specific or set as keywords that we promised and we just didn't get there. I can't really think of anything top of mind because we've moved away from that approach to our engagement kind of a while ago already. It's been like 3 or 4 years since we're like,
so your only advice would just be only look at like make your KPIs engagement based and not like keyword based.
Well, we like using the KPIs, but they're KPIs at the end of the day. That's not the measure of success for us. It's the measure of progress. That's the difference for us. We look at KPIs as progress. We look at leads as a success.
Okay.
So we want to move it along with the, past that. So if someone comes to us and says, well, we've been working together for a year and I'm still not top 3 for these keywords. Generally, we come to them and say, all right, but we're also have 300% increase in leads because this, they're not going to leave. It's still a long-term goal. As long as we're also transparent for maybe the reasons they aren't 3 for those keywords, we can still show that the value is still coming from what the work that we're doing.
Now, do you have any problems like getting that information from clients, or like did you in the past? Because like I've had clients.
It was a battle.
Yeah, I've had clients for sure. I mean, like I've had clients like outside of like a main gig for most of my life, most of my professional life. And it's always a struggle to get like confirmation of what converted, like especially if it's like a small business, right? Where like they just pick up the phone and like there isn't like a CRM. They're keeping track of it as just them like answering a phone, basically. Which there's a lot of businesses that are like that.
I completely agree, and legal is no exception. And there's 2 things that are kind of going on there, and it definitely applies to literally any business, is that the general business doesn't track their leads or have a CRM. And then also most businesses have terrible intake. And that's something that we've acknowledged more in the past couple of years, but has been always present since like day one. And that is a great piece of advice, I'd say, for anyone. That it's interesting because we still struggle with that today, but we're still continuing to come up with ideas of how to push clients in a way where they can participate more in conversion and intake, so we're all happy. But if it's something that was always present since day one, but we couldn't even like think that far ahead or fathom that was the issue, like we didn't even like realize that was a thing for probably several years.
Yeah, so it's really big to be able to prove what you've done is working, and a part of that is working with your client to get that information. And so whether it's like getting access, I think, to their CRM so you can see the conversion data as it comes in, or like helping them set something up to keep track of it. But like ultimately at the end of the day, if they don't have the conversion data, if they don't have lead data, then like it's going to be hard for you to like justify that you're responsible for it.
Yeah. And so that's like a great piece of advice for anyone that's listening, no matter where you're at, even if you're established or you're kind of working towards it, or you're working alone and you've already had conversations about like, well, I don't know what's coming from organic, or if it's coming from, Google, or these people already knew about me. Fortunately, there's a solution. So there are things in place if your client who you're working with is not being cooperative and is like, oh no, we're good, we pick up every call. I mean, the first one thing that other agencies do, and we don't really do it because we don't like wasting people's time, is that other agencies will call the people they're working with at different times of the week and different,
just to see if they're doing it, right?
And they'll be like, listen, someone put me on hold and never got back. Someone put me on hold and got back 8 minutes later. They didn't pick up at all. People will do that just to kind of illuminate the situation. And I guarantee it happens all the time.
Lead attribution is a problem at every business, at every scale, in marketing in general, across. It's a problem like in marketing. But, I think some places definitely do a much better job than others as far as attributing those leads to a particular source. And if you're smart, I think you can take a lot of the question marks out of it, right? A lot of the guesswork, and it's like setting up tracking numbers for things, right? Like making sure like you've done what are best practices for digital marketing to do that. But there's ultimately, like, if they call a number, it's a sale, that person doesn't report it to you, like you're not necessarily going to know.
Right. You're never going to know like the conversion. There's not really any way to know unless it's like in a CRM, you have access to the CRM. You can see it like updated or marked that it was a sale with like a monetary value. Like those things won't happen. So you have to get as much data to provide to the client.
I think it's also
are the most qualified.
I think it's also important to specify like you're responsible for leads, not necessarily sales. Because like you can't really control, like you can make the phone ring, but you can't control the salesperson. You can't control their personality, like their close rates, all that kind of stuff. Whoever's answering it.
It's funny because more SEOs and pay-per-click companies are taking more and more accountability for helping to convert leads because of how frustrated they're getting with their clients squandering the leads that they're providing to them. So we're friends with a Google Ads company that basically will recommend several intake vendors for them and be like, basically, hey, here's what I hear. They'll pretty much present it like, pick one because you were going to work with one of these. So they make them work with the intake company that specializes in conversion. And then they even coach people on what proper intake is, just to make sure that they have the highest likelihood of converting. So we use CallRail. It's been fantastic for tracking calls. It's dynamic number insertion. We're able to have a high level of certainty with organic and social and paid and LSAs. And
so you kind of present them with a report.
We do.
Yeah.
So I can tell like a real quick story. Well, we got all the time in the world. I'll just tell it how it is. So CallRail's been really great for us. We also, filter it out and make sure that when we're doing reporting on a monthly basis, there's no duplicates. We make sure that we look at the names, make sure it's not like a chiropractor or another marketing company. We actually also filter it by calls that are over 2 minutes, which we would say, increase the likelihood of it actually being legitimate. So there's this one time, once we were going through this process and setting the criteria for what we thought, to the best of our knowledge, what would be a qualified lead, we had a client says, hey, listen, I've been working with you for a bit. I just don't really think this is working. This is probably going to be my last month. And we did the call report and we sent it to him. And then we made him go on a call with us to go over the names one by one, not just like get it and just dismiss it, like literally hold him accountable to go through it. And on the call, he was going through it and it's like, yeah, oh yeah, that one's good. Oh, that came from organic. And at the end of the call, instead of leaving, he doubled his spend. So it's that kind of thing is like, I'm sold. I'm done. Like we're always going to have a high level of call tracking and other tracking.
So when you started, we talked a little bit about like project management, and you're just, I think, using like an Excel spreadsheet and showing what you were going to do, right?
Yeah.
You probably have evolved past that, that we're using some sort of like project management software, whether it's like Monday or like Asana or something. What would you suggest for someone starting out? Like what should they use? Because I think it's really, really important to obviously track like what you're going to do before you're going to do it, when you're doing it, and then have that from a reporting standpoint to provide. So,
the short answer is that we use Asana, and I'm not going to say it's like the end all be all. Like some people like Monday, and there are others. It's good for its own reasons. I really don't know what the difference is with other ones. I'm just so used to Asana. I was really thinking about, what in the world did I use 6 years ago? Did I use Basecamp? I don't remember.
Maybe, but you would suggest using it. I mean, like you probably started using Asana because it's pretty easy to use, but also I think the price point's like pretty good.
I think it's pretty reasonably priced.
Yeah, I think there's like there's like freemium levels of it, right? I think there's like a free level, and then if you want features and like or users added on, you have to pay, to bump it up. But it's definitely like a good, I think, entry level, or really even if you have to scale up it, from a price standpoint, I think it's a good software to use.
It's scaling well. I don't think that there's really been any limitations to it. I'm sure that we probably started using it once we hit like 7 or 8 employees, maybe less, maybe like 6. It's been integrating with Harvest for time tracking. It's been integrating with probably a few other things I can't think of. Like one thing that we were doing a lot was using Trello for a lot of other like process driven or things that kind of were more in like sequential steps. And Asana has like Trello boards. So we pretty much took all our boards that we had in Trello and put them into Asana because it's like literally the same thing.
You talked a little bit about like pricing. You just sort of like pulled it out of your butt from like a monthly like retainer. How do you go about doing it now though? And like, what would you suggest for someone starting out?
So pricing is like a hotly debated topic between everyone. And most of the time I feel like most people do it take like kind of a arbitrary stance on it. I feel a lot of people still wing it. Like we basically just started using some sort of calculator or some sort of logic to price things not even a year ago. I'm not gonna lie. So a lot of it, but not to say that it didn't make sense every time. We based it off like historical quotes. So it was a lot of, well, this is like a similar client, a similar scope of work, and this is what we priced last time. And this person is like, oh my gosh, it's too much. Or they said, oh, that's cheap. Like you get a lot of natural feedback or natural reactions from clients. So I'd hate to say that it's trial and error, because it kind of is, and it may be that way. There's other ways to calculate it. I mean, you could also price things based off of how many hours it's going to be and what your target hourly rate is and what your margins are. You have to just typical business principles can price things appropriately.
The margins are a lot easier to figure out when it's just you. It's a little more complicated when you have like employees.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Some people say for an agency, you'll talk to some people that run agencies or sold or bought agencies, and they're like, yeah, we're shooting for, a 20% net profit or like 30%. Like once you kind of establish those numbers, people have to educate themselves a little bit on like some of the across the board principles, whether it be, other podcasts that don't talk about the business side of that like that much. I'm not going to talk about those kinds of things, but there's plenty of information out there about running agencies from like that side of things. And they'll set all sorts of targets that'll help you kind of put in perspective what you're shooting for.
Did you ever like price shop and see what other agencies were charging?
Probably. We haven't done that in a while because we do have kind of officially our own standard. But yeah, after a while, talking to other agency owners and other people in the game, and you'll know what other people are charging in similar agencies after a bit. But then you'll find out that most of them are like arbitrary. That's like the thing. Like I'll talk to, other agents. I talked to a lot of other agencies in our space, and there's one I was speaking with, and I was talking to their director of business development. And it's like, yeah, so what's going on? What are you up to? And he's like, yeah, not much. And we're only accepting clients. Minimum spend is $6,500 a month. I'm like, what's that based on? He's like, that's just a minimum. So what happens if someone goes to you with $6,499? And he's like, we don't take them. I'm like, I don't get it, and I never will get it because it's just.
Well, that's probably based. Like, I mean, that's probably based on the size of the agency too, and like what they have to take in to even like turn a profit. Right, like based off of like how many people work there, all that stuff.
It could be, but just based off of like what I see internally and what it costs to do things, I'm like, I still don't get it, because we take an approach that's still like a lot of our pricing scales with scope, right? Yeah. That's what enables us to still take what we quote unquote smaller clients.
I mean, I think competition plays a bit of it too, and like like you kind of know ahead of time, like if it's a client in like a big city that like, and depending how poorly they're doing, the amount of effort to get them to where they need to be is going to be way more than if they're in a small market, they're in a small city and there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah. They'll kind of know. And your average person you're talking to, it's not that often where they're like, I've never done this before. I've never talked to anyone about it, and I have no clue how much this is going to cost. Like everyone will kind of know, and everyone's always going to have a number in their mind. And some people, frankly, and there's other sales tactics, this is just like whatever works for you thing. But there are some people that are like, if you ask them what their budget is, they'll tell you. I mean, some people don't. They're like, I don't know. I mean, you got to tell me how much it costs. But some people are like, yeah, I was hoping to spend no more than $5,000 a month. And then they're like, cool, I can work with $5,000 a month. But sometimes it happens. Depends what your approach to sales is.
Yeah. Have you ever had issues with clients paying?
Oh yeah. So that happened back in the day more. It happened to us a lot in the beginning.
Yeah. It's just people they weren't paying on time.
Almost never. And it's to this day, Chase and I still kind of talk about it. And we're just like, do they know that we were smaller starting up and they were taking advantage of us? Or were they just the kind of clients where they were just naturally more toxic and just wanted to stiff the people they worked with? And we still don't really exactly know, but I mean, Ryan tip number 3, no matter how big their client is, no matter how big, like they could be 50% of your monthly revenue, you have to stop working with them after 30 days of not paying. Like, I know it would hurt, and you're probably like, oh, but like, I'll keep working, but if I lose them, like that's half my revenue. They're going to probably take advantage of the situation, because more times than not, It's not that they're like behind and they're like, oh shoot, I just like the check got lost in the mail. Like they might be just flexing, see how far it can go.
Have you ever recouped any of that after the fact? Like, let's say you stopped working one. Like, did you ever get paid?
There was one that's kind of funny. When we were in New York a long time ago, and we were working more with restaurants, because that's actually the majority of our clients at the time. So we were working with this restaurant out in I guess like in Midtown, and they were our biggest client at the time. I don't know how much it was. I can guarantee it wasn't that crazy, but it was for us at the time. And I think that we worked 4 months without getting paid.
Wow.
So they were behind quite a bit, but again, exactly the same mindset. Yeah, well, if we get like too aggressive, then they're just going to cut it. We're never going to get paid, and we felt like our hands were tied kind of situation. But at some point, we did have a contract, fortunately, and then we did actually end up serving the guy, and it really got his attention after ignoring us for a bit. And he wasn't like you can't sue me, you can't bring me to court, I'll kill you. Like he actually was like, all right, let's figure this out.
He's like, yeah, you're right, I haven't paid you.
Yeah. So we didn't really technically get paid back in cash, but Chase did have the sickest graduation party I've ever seen for renting out the restaurant for about 3 hours with a full bar and catered food.
So there was at least like some sort of kickback from that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't the value because it was his restaurant, but it was a pretty fun party.
Clearly not still a client, is he?
It's very rare that we get stiffed now.
Yeah.
Only times that's happened more recently, and it was for 1 month, was if someone on our team messed something up really bad, and they're like, I'm done, and also I'm not paying this month, and then we have to figure it out. But that doesn't happen that often. Like just straight up doing our job and not geting paid. But that's to just do with contracts, and it has.
This is something that you're probably going to have to deal with.
I guarantee it. 100%.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows when you have clients. They're people too, and some people are good at running a business, some people aren't good at running a business. I would say most businesses aren't good at running a business.
No, they don't forecast. They don't like have their coffers. They don't have padding for things. You're going to talk to people, and one of the things you can do is you're just going to be able to sense some of these things before you even work with someone. And so you have to be aware, and not everyone's going to have the luxury of like vetting and choosing clients. Like that takes a while. You don't really get to choose your clients for a while.
Really, years.
Because, I mean, we do, and we have for a few years, but it's only been like a few years. I mean, there was talking about 4 years where we worked with basically everybody. But if you want to save the headache and you want to be wiser than I was in the past, you're going to know. I mean, in some ways you might interview a client a little bit yourself. Like if someone's coming to you and they're saying like, oh man, I really need this marketing to work, or else because I'm gonna have to I'm gonna go out of business in 3 months. You can't really work with that person because the likelihood that you're gonna get paid is like fairly minimal.
If you're the savior of the business, it's probably not a good business to like.
It's already failed. Yeah, like that's the thing.
I get that all the time in the world that I work in, which is partly franchise, and it's like people never follow the franchise guides of what you're supposed to do, right? So like they pay all this money to be a franchise and have like a procedure for operating, but then they don't follow it, right? And so like digital marketing is only gonna do so much. It's only gonna drive so many leads. It's only gonna like you still need to do all the other stuff that like isn't necessarily digital, and it's not glamorous and it's not fun, but it's like really really crucial to like running a business and like getting revenue like regularly coming in different streams. And very often it's they look at SEO as like the silver bullet to fix like all their mismanagement problems. So if the phone is ringing off the hook all day but no one's answering it, or you're only answering 1 out of every 10 because you don't know how to staff a store, or you can't keep staff or whatever, like ultimately they have to run a good business, or it's all for naught. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time.
Exactly. It goes with intake. I know like a consultant, he won't even work with them unless they like sign a formal document saying like, I'm going to get a CRM and I'm going to have proper intake. I'm not going to waste either one of our time.
It's like that Glenn Ross movie where he's like, these leads aren't for you. All right, because you're weak. These leads are for people who can actually close, and they're golden, and you're not one of those people, so we're not giving them.
That's brutal. But in some ways, I'd almost encourage people, and this isn't necessarily things that we ask, but we can see it when you're talking to the business owner. You can see their website, you can see what they've accomplished. You know that they're doing something. Like you know that they've gone there for a reason. So we don't have to be like,
It's
you have
pretty
to have an
easy
intake
to pick up on someone that has their stuff together and someone that doesn't, or at least someone that like cares and like will put out the effort versus someone that doesn't. Like there are definitely business owners that I think they're wet behind the ears, right? They're naive and they don't know how to do it yet, but like they will. And then there are people that like maybe they've had a business for like 5 years and it's never really grown, and then you start asking the question, well, why? Like, what have you done in those 5 years to like do anything? And you can kind of spot that though.
Yeah, you just like, kind of ask them to have that conversation, and you'll have discovery calls with people. You have the intro, however you find them, whether they're a referral, whether they're in a networking group or social media, or however you decide to take the plunge and start doing your lead gen and acquisition.
So that's a great segue to the next question I had for you, and that was like finding clients. So let's say you've gotten a few to start, maybe you got 2 or 3. How did you go about finding like new clients when you first started out?
So starting out, it was a little bit of a domino effect, where we got a self-storage company in New York City that had like a lot of locations and was like a pretty good monthly retainer. And a couple of people on the team were movers and shakers. And I mean, really, then it turns into referrals and word of mouth. So that's really a great way to start. It's absolutely
referrals.
I don't really necessarily have an approach for asking. Hopefully you just do a great job and you end up getting some word of mouth referrals from them when they're happy. But it's paramount. I mean, it is make or break for your first few clients, that if you do a bad job, like that
it's really hard to
seeds you're planting are not going to be watered, and it's not going to be fruitful like from the get-go. You got to start all over again.
Yeah. So you were just getting it organically. You weren't trying to find it. People were essentially like coming to you through relationship building that you have with current clients.
That's how it starts. Again, that's nothing really novel. In retrospect, it's good to kind of develop some channels. Like we were trying a lot of different things, and like none of them did crap, except do you remember that we did rank #1 in the country for fitness marketing company and got like an insane amount of leads every day.
I do remember that. Yes.
So actually, one thing that we did like absolutely kill it, but it like didn't work out because of just the nature of the industry, was we decided to take an organic approach. Like, let's rank our own website for good actionable keywords, such as like a fitness marketing company. We ranked #1, and we used to get 3 or 4 leads a day. Like legitimately, we would be.
It turns out those aren't really great leads. Like those aren't really great business.
The problem is that it was for us a very difficult industry to work in, because we did not mesh with the business owners. And so a lot of people, some people listening might think like different price points are like fine. It just depends on your lifestyle. But, a lot of people wanted to pay like $300 a month on average. And the way that we were trying to structure, it would never work. It might work for an individual, depending on like a very, very limited scope of work. But when we had like employees, if we were to break down the hours and then the calls and the reporting, I'm sure we were making like $20, $30 an hour, which is like horrendous for an agency. It's for an individual, it could be a good lifestyle. For an agency, it's like not sustainable.
One rule or like one piece of advice that you would give an agency owner starting out, if you had to sum it all up.
Not one. Let me talk out something else. Maybe it might be 2. Okay. So there's always like pivotal moments, and there's always like things where you can, that there's like a shift in the winds. Like there are definitely things are moving in hopefully a better and more positive direction. And I think one of them for us was, I think the sooner that you can start to join like kind of communities or like a mastermind group or some sort of, with other agency owners or other SEOs, but it can also just be business owners in general. I think the sooner kind of the better. I mean, you don't also, like, no offense to people, you don't want to waste people's time. Like people that are like been running a company for 10 or 15 years and have employees, and then you roll up and you're like, cool. So I just filed my taxes for the first time and thinking about like doing my first hire. Like it still has to be within a group that you have like-minded individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the sooner that can like kind of happen, the better, because you learn from everyone's, their successes and their accomplishments, and then also their issues and their obstacles, and it's always great to like relate and bounce ideas. So the sooner you can kind of get with like-minded individuals and in somewhat of a similar spot. I mean, you always want to like work with people that are doing better than you do. You have to, see what the next step looks like. So I always think that that's good, and I was kind of stubborn about that because I'm just like, I don't want to freaking talk about business people, but it's just going to happen. You can't thrive on an island. You're gonna have to.
Honestly, people love to talk about their successes and tell other people like how they were successful. So people will tell you stuff that like they probably even shouldn't, like competitive stuff.
Oh, sure. And that's like the great thing. I mean, we did one, Chase and I made a big difference, and we still talk to a few of the people that we met in Atlanta like 4 years ago. And one of them, was a competitor of ours, and he was just like completely transparent with how he operated his entire business. And we were like, I can't believe he's divulging his whole process. But that's how it works. He doesn't care. Like they're confident. They still know that you're not going to like replicate every single thing, and they're not giving you the secret sauce every freaking step of the way. But yeah, they can tell you like some of the main things. And I think that was great. And the second, which I really wish we did sooner or later, especially honestly with my background, is we should have niched into legal much sooner than later, because we were working in like every industry. And after a while, we're like, well, how are we going to put out content? How are we going to establish ourselves as thought leaders? How are we going to say that we're experts on something? And I'm like, wait,
you're doing all these
like we're doing so much legal. Like I've been doing legal forever. Like let's just focus more on legal. And then before you know it, then you're having pitches, and so like, oh, we only do legal. Oh, I'm talking to 3 other agencies that do everything. Oh, yeah, they can't just do everything. Legal is very competitive and specific. Oh, okay, you guys are experts.
So finding a niche is probably a positive from the start.
The way that I tell people, when I tell anyone that's listening, because I don't have this conversation every day, I think that you really do have to pick one or two things. You either pick an industry that's like pretty specific, or you pick like a service that's very specific that can be applied to many different industries. You have to like kind of pick one though, especially with how many agencies freaking exist nowadays. Yeah. So if you do legal, like we do SEO and we do content, and then we'll like have campaigns that are social, we'll build websites. We just started doing video production. So it's like kind of a suite, but it's still not everything. But we don't really work with too many other industries besides, some medical, maybe some dental. Like that's because that's like pretty similar in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But if I were to just only do content marketing, that's it. Like just great content that's optimized, then I would feel comfortable working in a lot more industries.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like that sums up a pretty good introduction to things that you should be concerned with.
10 or 20.
Things that you should be knowledgeable about. Just know that it exists. I think that the most useful thing of this is knowing that like you're probably not going to get paid at some point. You're definitely not going to get paid.
100%. And what happens, you'll probably waste more time trying to pursue it than just moving on and dropping the client.
Yeah. So if you really want to, go to battle over that, you need to have like a lawyer that you can work with. And generally I think when people get served something, it lights a fire under them. Like, I got to solve this problem versus like find a legal route for it. Like most small business owners would rather not deal with any of that.
It probably doesn't feel good to get served. Like
it doesn't feel good to get served, but also like then you have to deal with being served, right? And it's like the unknown of like, what do I have to figure out how to deal with this, which is like a lot. So really good advice on that. I think finding a niche that you can be successful in, that you can be like a thought leader in, I think is also like a really, really good thing. And I know just from my own experience, like when I was taking on, side clients, like they would be in all types of different things. And like, you're more excited, like, hey, you're getting the business, right? Like people want to use you and like you can generate some revenue, but it is definitely really good advice to like find clients in that niche that you want to work in, that like you can be successful in, and that can be profitable.
Yeah, like I really like legal. I like the clients and the competitiveness. But I would recommend, and I think we've talked about this in podcasts before, just don't pick a niche because the people just have money. Like it's just,
well,
I know, like,
keep in mind that the more money from a niche, the more competitive it's going to be. Like, there's going to be agencies, very boutique agencies that just service that specific thing that make a ton of money off of it. And like legal is no exception. I would say, like, outside of like stuff in the medical industry, like plastic surgery, things like that, it's probably the most competitive industry that you can work in from an SEO standpoint, just because there is so much money in like the leads out there, and there's just a lot of competition. There's a ton of lawyers.
Well, that's why even people that are in legal are niching even more, and not just doing legal, they're only working with personal injury lawyers.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, that's totally. You could be like, I only do DUI, right? That's the only thing that like I feel comfortable.
Wild.
With. Yeah.
Crazy.
So that's totally true. All right. Well, I think that's pretty good introductory advice if you're getting started out, and hopefully you have an actual business and you're not doing this all like illegally and laundering the money. And so I would suggest not doing that. I also think that like keeping really, really good accounting is really, really crucial, I think, especially like when it comes to like tax time at the end of the year. It's a whole different world if you've never had your own business, like taxes and like, expenses and things like that, where you need like good record keeping. Like it's really important to be able to show like
maybe you get away with it for like a couple of years. Who knows?
If you're not making any money, yeah, you can get away with it. But if you are making like, like if you're making enough to like supplement your income, you need to be able to like have good accounting. It's really, really crucial, and it can be like a really big difference between like making money and like owing money, or like not making like any money, essentially.
Hiring people, where to find them, how to develop people.
Yeah, this is going to be a whole 4.4 part series that Ryan's gonna walk us through, because he has just a ton of experience. You've been doing it for like what, 7-8 years now?
Every single time I'm on a pitch or I'm talking to a client, they're like, "How long have you been in business?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, I got to work on that. Maybe like 7, maybe 8, maybe 6. I think that technically incorporated 9 years ago, technically, but I think it's been full-time, really kind of full-time for 5 or 6. See, I'm still doing it. I'm just going to say 6 years. I'm just going to say it was really full-time in 2016, because I think that's really, really around where it was.
I mean, that's a long time, man, especially considering most businesses go out of business the first year they exist, right? Like that's it. So, you've already beaten the odds doing it. So it's quite an accomplishment.
Gotcha, guys.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks so much to everyone that's listening. We're going to do, a series for this one. So hopefully you get some use out of it.
You have to finish it. It's just starting.
It's just
hold us accountable.
But again, we appreciate all of our listeners, even though there's been a giant gap between our last episode. Hopefully we'll keep this up pretty regularly going on in the new year, in 2022. But again, we appreciate everyone that listens, and be sure to like, share, subscribe anywhere that you, listen to this podcast at, whether it be the Podbean, which is what hosts us, or which doesn't pay us any money, or, Apple, whatever it is, just like, share,
whatever's out there, whatever's new in the past, 5 months,
the Stitchers, whatever's out there. But we do really, really appreciate everyone that listens. So thank you so much again for listening. I'm Paul Warren.
And I'm Ryan Klein.
And this has been another episode of SEO's Dead and Other Lies.
See ya.
Bye.